What is good, everybody? Welcome to TGI Football here on the SB Nation NFL show. A reminder before we keep going that this show is presented to you by our friends at DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer. When you sign up, that is code SBNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. My dog, Bear, is a very passionate gambler. He does his betting only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Thank you very much, Bear. Maybe he'll take the over on Justin Fields rushing yards this week. My name is RJ Ochoa. His name is Stephen Serda. The one and only Brandon Lee Gowton not with us on the heels of the Philadelphia Eagles Thursday Night Football win. Make sure to subscribe to the SB Nation NFL show. Wherever you get your podcast, you can also watch us on YouTube. Stephen, Bear picked the perfect moment to bark.
You did call it right before the show started. You were like, he's probably going to bark in 2 minutes, but let's just get going. So yeah, it was a pretty easy prediction, but I'm kind of bummed BLG's not here after that Eagles game last night. I would like to talk to him about what the team sees in Kenneth Gainwell over DeAndre Swift after last night's performance. But it was, all in all, it was a very entertaining Thursday night football game.
We're about to break down Thursday Night Football. We also have a very special surprise for the podcast audience here on TGI Football. Amazon Prime, who had the game on Thursday night, one of their analysts, one of their pre- and post-game show hosts, Ryan Fitzpatrick, will join us. I sat down with him for about 15 minutes, so we'll throw that here in a little bit. Again, that's for the podcast audience only, but we will have the video available on the Blog and the Boys YouTube channel if anybody wants to watch that. So we'll get to that. We'll get to on the subject of Bear predictions, our predictions for week 2 of the NFL season. We have, of course, our DraftKings same game parlay. We have our locks of the week. Brandon is not here as noted, but he did get his information in. So we do have his things. He didn't tell us, unless he told you, who he wanted to apply the zap towards. I think it'd be kind of awkward for you and I to hand out the zap just between the two of us, but I suppose that is possible. But nevertheless, let's get to Thursday Night Football. You mentioned it. A 34-28 win for the Eagles. They get to 2-0 on the season. The Vikings, of course, fall to 0-2, Stephen. They are 0-2 in one-possession games after going 11-0 in games of such kind a year ago, although there was kind of a it was a backdoor cover. Literally, the Vikings did cover that 7.5-point line, but they got themselves to that one-score game line with that last touchdown. I don't know. I want to hear your takeaways first, whether you were impressed with the Eagles or, not impressed with the Vikings. What were your thoughts after the first Thursday night game of the year? First Thursday night football game of the year, because last week was Sunday night football on Thursday night.
I mean, I think similar last season, you really called your shot with the Colts and just absolutely nailed it. Through 2 weeks, I'm feeling pretty strong about how I felt about the Vikings coming into this season. Obviously, they're an explosive offense and they can put up points in a hurry. Justin Jefferson just looks like he is absolutely unstoppable. Like, it doesn't matter who is trying to cover him. He's going to wind up with 10 catches and over 100 yards because he's just that good and unguardable right now. But they just didn't improve enough over the offseason for a team that won so many one-score games last season to make me think that they can do that again this season, because that's just not something that is sustainable. And through 2 weeks, they've gotten as close to sustaining that as you possibly can. I think like they're an exciting, fun passing attack to watch, but they just don't have enough defensively to win games like that, especially not when they're turning the football over, and they're turning the football over like crazy through the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, it was the most turnovers through the first 5 quarters that the team has had in 5 years or something like that. And the Eagles kind of left the door open for them, and they just kind of couldn't capitalize. I mean, they had the special teams turnover, they had the fumble right after, and then Kirk Cousins got hit and fumbled at the beginning of the second half. That explosive offense isn't enough. I mean, if you can't survive that, no offense can. And the numbers do look, I guess, respectable. Kirk Cousins, 31 of 44, 364 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have the fumble. Alexander Mattison only had 28 yards. Justin Jefferson, you mentioned it, 11 catches, 159 yards. We did see the worst rule in football. Now, Rob Stats Guerrero was a part of the show last year. He is fine with the rule, and so is Brandon. What are your thoughts on the fumbling into the end zone? I hope you agree with me and the rest of the world that it's horrible and it's dumb and it's stupid.
I didn't realize that they think that's a fine rule, because it's not. It's stupid. It's an idiotic rule. It doesn't make any sense. And It's just for a player like Justin Jefferson, like the difficulty level that he had to go through to make that catch, and it gets fumbled, and for it to be such a game-changing play like that, because that wound up being the difference in the game.
Right. That was a
Like
10-point swing in a
yeah,
6-point game. Right.
yeah, that's incredibly frustrating, and it's stupid. I don't understand for all the rules that they seem to change every season that don't improve the game in any way and generally make it worse. I don't understand how that rule is not up for review every single year.
Rich Eisen constantly says, I'm sure he'll say we're recording, streaming this at 10:30 in the morning Central Time on Friday, and I think his show starts at 11. So I'm sure he'll say this again, but I've heard him say many, many, many times, and he's the face of the NFL Network, that it's that someday this will happen in the Super Bowl, and it will decide the Super Bowl, and the world will flip upside down. Again, it's dumb. This happened at the end of the first half, so it was kind of dramatic. But I mean, do you remember when this happened between the Cowboys and the then Oakland Raiders 6 years ago?
I don't
It was
know.
a Sunday night game, and I was there, which is, and plus it was the Cowboys, which is I remember. But it was literally the final moments of the game. Derek Carr, tried to score and reached out. Like that was the difference here. It wasn't like Justin Jefferson was reaching towards the pylon. Like it just happened to be fumbled, like from like the whatever it was 2 yard line. But
Yeah.
in that, like I would encourage you to go YouTube the Derek Carr moment because it was as dramatic as it could possibly be. And like if that were to happen, like I'm fine if you want to penalize the offense, if you want to send them all the way back to their own 20 even or 25. Like I think that's kind of dumb. But man alive, for them to lose the ball is so stupid.
Yeah, it's brutal, and especially like because after the game, I know Justin Jefferson was like, "That's on me. Like, I can't allow that to happen." And it's just it sucks for a player as special as him to have that be the thing that like people remember about his performance in this game because he's getting pretty much shadowed by Darius Slay all night, who is a great cornerback, but the Eagles had a bunch of injuries in their secondary last night too. And Justin Jefferson is just so special that it doesn't matter that he's getting shadow coverage from one of the best cornerbacks in football. But that's the thing that is going to wind up being remembered from this game. And it is unbelievably stupid.
So on the Eagles side of things, they're 2-0. They have a long bit of rest because they play on Monday Night Football next week. They play the Buccaneers, who have also beaten the Vikings this season. So 2-0, and I mean, at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. But this was kind of a troubling or concerning performance for the Eagles. I mean, not from my standpoint, but the offense really struggled. They had the few kind of big plays, obviously the big Devontae Smith touchdown, but even that first big Devontae Smith catch at the beginning of the game was kind of an underthrown ball. It felt like the Eagles were obsessed with running Jalen Hurts early on in this game. Jalen Hurts had some turnovers. He's obviously got multiple turnovers now, which was something he didn't do really at all last year. So we're seeing some regression in that sense. We had the Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown scuffle, if you want to call it that, on the sidelines that Nick Sirianni had to get in the middle of. It does feel like there's a little bit of trouble in paradise for the Eagles, even though they're 2-0.
Yeah, and they weren't particularly impressive in week one against the New England Patriots, but
Right.
I think after that performance against the Patriots, and then last night after the ridiculous first quarter where everybody's just turning the ball over and fumbling and nobody can hang on to it, like just a really sloppy first quarter of the football game. And after that, they settled in and they were like, okay, I know we got a new offensive coordinator, but we just have to do what was successful for us last season. And so they just started running the football, and their offensive line was actually having some problems against the Vikings defensive line early in that game. And so they were just like, okay, we're going to revert to what we know works, and we're just going to run the ball and challenge you to stop us because we know that's what our offensive line is great at. And that's what they need to do more. And obviously DeAndre Swift went nuts and had
Oh
an
man.
awesome game. And makes you question why Kenneth Gainwell was the number one running back coming out of training camp. And maybe he still is. I don't know. Personally, I would think that 175 yards and a score on Thursday Night Football would show you that DeAndre Swift probably deserves more touches than Kenneth Gainwell. I think he's the more talented player. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out in Detroit. He had the injury issues, and then they just kind of stopped using him at the end of last season. And then this weird situation coming into this year with Kenneth Gainwell getting the look ahead of him. Maybe it's because he's more familiar with the offense, but he's obviously the superior player. I'm not too worried about the Eagles. Like the defensive questions, I think we've highlighted on this show, and those were there last night. Of course, you have to include the injuries in the secondary, but their secondary was kind of questionable in general last season and coming into this season. It's the defensive line is where they're going to win on that side of the ball. And I still feel pretty strongly that the Eagles are one of the absolute best teams in the NFL, but they have looked rough a couple of times here early in the season, but I think they'll settle down and figure all that stuff out.
Bear is very passionate about this.
Well,
we're making it through Friday morning.
You mentioned the AJ Brown stuff, and he did have a long touchdown that was called back because of a penalty last night, and that's a bummer. It's through 2 weeks, he hasn't put up like these monster AJ Brown performances, whereas like Devontae Smith has looked really good. And I think last night was just kind of frustration because AJ Brown's like, I want to make plays. Like this Viking secondary is trash, and I know I can burn them. And Devontae Smith had already done it earlier in the game. He's like, where's my touchdown? Like, I want to burn this secondary too. And I think he was just kind of frustrated with the amount of times they were running the ball. But it got to a point where Minnesota just absolutely could not do anything to stop the Eagles from running the football, and DeAndre Swift just absolutely gashing them. So I don't blame the Eagles for that, but I also understand where AJ Brown's coming from. I mean, Jalen Hurts didn't actually throw the football very much last night. Like after that first quarter, they were like, we're just going to run it down their throats. And that's a good recipe for the Eagles to win football games. So I understand where he's coming from, but that's kind of the Eagles' MO. And they're going to have some games like that where they just challenge you to stop them from rushing the football. And if you can't, they're just going to do it all night long.
It's wild to me that Devontae Smith had the 63-yard reception. So Jalen Hurts threw for 193 yards. So take away 63, that's 130, right? That was one reception, one pass for Jalen Hurts. So if we just take away that one, I mean, it's an incredible one. So not trying to say it doesn't count, but outside of that, Jalen Hurts was 17 of 22 for 130 yards. It was just a really limited night in the air. And you're right. Like it made all the sense in the world for Philly to kind of lean into the run. I don't know that I buy into like there's drama in Philly with the AJ Brown thing. But it's interesting. And that was a take I had all throughout the offseason on the NFC's mixtape was that like the rise of Devontae Smith was coming. Like from, he's going to command more targets because he said not that AJ Brown is not a special player, but that Devontae is just evolving and he's obviously, a different type of player. And so it just makes sense to take the lowest hanging fruit. And so that's what Jalen Hurts did. And the Vikings, man, I bailed on them this week on the mixtape. So like, I'm just disappointed. I think they look great and they look fine in some respects, but like you can't fall down. Like you're just feeding the meme at this point. You're like living up to what everyone says you are. It's really disappointing.
Well, and on the Minnesota side, they just straight up can't run the football at all. So like every week, Kirk Cousins is going to throw 45 times a game. And that works in most cases. And the Vikings are going to be able to score on virtually any defense in the NFL. But if you turn the football over and are playing from behind constantly, like I know they won all those games like that, you just can't live like that in the National Football League. It's just not going to last. And so if they stop turning the football over, I don't think they're going to be able to run the football all season. Like I'm just not an Alexander Mattison believer, and they don't really have any depth behind them, like just a bunch of unproven guys that have done nothing in the NFL. So they're going to have to throw every single week, and that's where they can put up points. But if you turn the football over and you're playing from behind after every first quarter, like that's just going to fall flat on its face eventually.
I think Kirk is still underrated, and he had the fumble, but the like early turnovers he had nothing to do with. You know what I mean? Like the hole they got buried in was not really his fault directly. But I remain more convinced than ever. I am more convinced than ever that he's going to be playing elsewhere next year. Like, I mean, the Vikings seem they're almost like excited to start their rebuild. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of see it. Yeah. Like, and I don't know that I'm convinced that Justin Jefferson is going to re-sign with them. Like, how do we know Justin Jefferson isn't the like big, massive Tyreek Hill trade of the offseason to get a brand new contract elsewhere with a quarterback who he feels like can properly get him the ball? If Kirk is indeed elsewhere himself, like why would Justin Jefferson want to stick around for a rebuild in 2024?
And seeing some of these star wide receivers that just can't produce because of their quarterback situations. Like right. If I'm Justin Jefferson, unless the Vikings somehow work their way into the number 1 overall pick and get Caleb Williams. And I know next year's a good quarterback draft class outside of Caleb Williams, but he is like generational player. like, then I wouldn't feel very confident about Minnesota letting Kirk walk and then trying to figure it out from there. Like, this is a team that drafted Kellen Mond a couple of years ago. It was like, maybe he could be something. And then Kellen Mond just like can't even stay on an NFL team now.
Okay, that concludes Thursday Night Football. At least the Vikings covered. I did take them in a pool that I'm in to cover, so good job, me. For now, the podcast audience, we're going to send you to the conversation that I had with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Stephen, you'll be delighted to know that Ryan is pushing a partnership that he has with Jameson. So it's very interesting. So, podcast audience, enjoy our conversation with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Welcome back. Ryan Fitzpatrick's awesome. Stephen, one of the things I asked him was when the Harvard thing became a thing that he was aware of. Because I would put that up there with the and I told him this, the pantheon of like Antonio Gates played basketball in college. And he was like, oh, it happened like right away. It was like, that was like the only thing anybody could say about me that was interesting, which is kind of cool. Like, that's a cool thing to have said about you, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because when he came in the NFL and was all of a sudden a starter and nobody was really expecting that, it's like, this guy's from Harvard. What's he doing out here? He's got no business being an NFL starter, and worked out. He was a fun quarterback to watch for a long time.
He was, and now he's doing the Amazon Prime thing, so he's bouncing from city to city. So good for him. Thanks to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and thanks to Jameson for the time. Okay, Steven, so we are going to preview all of the games in week 2, but first we are going to do our Pick 3 segment, which is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That is code SBNFL. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, last week, Steven, we do this every week. We picked Sunday Night Football, and only you hit. You had CeeDee Lamb over 69.5 receiving yards, so we were 1 of 3 there. In the history of this show, we have yet to hit a same-game parlay, but this is the week that changes. The Miami Dolphins are visiting the New England Patriots on Sunday Night Football, so we have put together another same game parlay. As mentioned, the absent Brandon has sent one in for us. But Steven, you got it right last week. So what is the leg that you were taking?
So I think everybody's going to be really hot on Miami, and they should. Obviously, they were awesome last week offensively, and their offense just looks insanely explosive. And I think they're going to put up points a lot this season. But I'm still skeptical going against this Patriots team and just the matchups that Bill Belichick can provide defensively, especially against a division rival. And Miami, for everything that they did well last week, they got absolutely gashed on the ground by the Chargers. And I think we're going to see a lot of Ramondre Stevenson this week from the Patriots. And it was kind of weird for New England last week. Like, they threw the ball way more than anybody I think could have anticipated. But I like Ramondre Stevenson. I think he's the most talented running back, despite the fact that they have Ezekiel Elliott on that roster. And this is a great matchup for Ramondre to get back into a positive situation for fantasy owners and for himself and to produce. So I took Ramondre Stevenson, 60 plus alternate rushing yards at plus 140. I think this is a great matchup for him.
Yeah, I think that's smart. You mentioned it. The Chargers had all sorts of success on the ground. It stands to reason that would happen against the Dolphins again. It stands to reason that Bill Belichick's going to kind of want to move the ball. The Patriots offense was, kind of cute last week. I know that Mac Jones was the one kind of airing it out, but this is a solid, safe kind of place to stop for you. I'm going to lean into what we saw from Miami. Tyreek Hill, what was his guarantee? It was 2,000 yards, whatever. Got off to a pretty solid start last week. And so I couldn't believe that this was that low. Tyreek Hill, 80 or more alternate receiving yards at minus 140. I don't see a way that Tyreek doesn't get his kind of on a weekly basis. Tyreek Hill is one of the more safe bets to me in terms of prop bets or anything like that when it comes to the NFL. We're still early in the season. I know we have our questions about longevity when it comes to the Dolphins, but right now I'm going to take Tyreek Hill and I'm going to feel really good about it. So Tyreek Hill, 80 plus alternate receiving yards at minus 140. I mentioned that Brandon did get a leg in. His is also at minus 140, and we're kind of lined up. So if Tyreek Hill has a deep bomb of a touchdown, it'll help Brandon out. He is taking Steven Tua Tagovailoa at 2+ passing touchdowns at minus 140, which also feels safe, but it's also kind of scary because this is a Bill Belichick defense, and it kind of feels like I obviously like my leg, and you're the one who got it right last week. This feels the least stable to me, the one that BLG picked.
Yeah, and I think some of that is just the Patriots defense and just it doesn't seem like because right now on paper the Patriots secondary looks like it's super suspect and like you're like they should be able to find these matchups. And Tyreek Hill traditionally has really burned Bill Belichick and had a lot of
Right.
success against him because he's just an impossible player to cover even when their secondary is healthy. But it's still a division matchup, and I feel like Belichick just always kind of figures these things out, at least on the defensive side of the ball, especially against teams that he knows this well and that he sees every single season. So it's a big game for Tua, and I think Tua is kind of trying to go on like this rampage right now to silence all the doubters. And in his press conference this week, he's like, "Well, I don't know, I threw what about 466, like 466 yards? What's that say about my deep ball?" And it's like, yeah, well, Tua, I still see you leave that thing short quite a bit. But Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are really special players. But I do think the 2+ touchdowns is a little scary.
Yeah, I wasn't a believer in the Dolphins as a whole coming into this season. Obviously, the Aaron Rodgers injury really opens the door for them. If I could repick division winners, because I did pick the Jets to win the AFC East, if I kind of a mulligan right now, I'd take the Dolphins over the Bills. My lack of belief in Buffalo is well known. But that's a different subject. Our same game parlay once again at DraftKings Sportsbook. If you take all three plus 525, Steven, what does that mean if I bet $10?
I don't know. I'm bad at math. I'm not the odds guy on this.
Okay, it means you win a lot. That's basically what we'll kind of leave it at. But for now, Steven is the only person who's gotten a leg right at this point in the season. So hopefully this is the week. We're gonna do it, Steven. We can't we said we couldn't get skunked last year, and we did. So we've got to make amends early and often here in 2023. Let's get to week 2 though. Let's start with the team that you cover on a daily basis, Steven. The Kansas City Chiefs. Chris Jones back in the fold. Travis Kelce, I guess, back in the fold. In the news for lots of other reasons, obviously, this week. The Chiefs are laying 3.5 points on the road at Jacksonville this week as they look to avoid starting 0-2.
Yeah, this is obviously a really big game. Jacksonville's 1-0, Chiefs are 0-1. They certainly don't want to start the season 0-2, though. I think, especially looking ahead for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think their next 4 games after this are pretty favorable, especially considering the Jets don't have Aaron Rodgers anymore.
The 5th one is too. It's the Chargers. They own the Chargers.
You can those are always close, weird games between the Chargers, though. But I think this is a statement game for Jacksonville. And I think Jacksonville, obviously, Calvin Ridley looked great last week. Travis Etienne looked great last week. But it's going against the Colts, who are an inferior team to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs didn't have Travis Kelce in week 1. Seems like he's going to go in week 2. Chris Jones might be on a snap count because he missed every single workout you could possibly miss, and including week 1. So he's going to have a ramp up period, but the Jags offensive line is kind of questionable. So I'm curious to see if Chris Jones finds some success now that he's on a 1-year deal that is loaded with incentives to try to get some extra money. I think he's really got to push for that extra money because he cost himself a lot of money with this holdout. So I like the Chiefs in this game. Everybody's billing it as kind of a statement revenge game for Jacksonville because the Chiefs beat them twice last season, but I'm still not totally sold on Jacksonville, even though I think they're an ascending football team.
So you locked up the Jaguars last week, but now you're not totally sold on them. That's interesting. They did kind of play with their food a little bit last week when it came to their win against the Colts, and they could have lost that game, honestly. Early on, I thought they were going to, actually. I'm with you. It's weird how the Chiefs seem like the more desperate team. Not that they are desperate, but it feels like they're desperate to kind of stabilize things. It's been a long week and a half since losing the season opener, and I know that Chiefs fans can be a little bit fickle and a little bit impatient, so they're anxious to kind of get to 500 because if they lose, it was weird obviously last week with them and Cincinnati and Buffalo all losing. All of a sudden the Jaguars are 2-0 and have that tiebreaker over you, and you've got a lot of work to do just to potentially get that coveted 1 seed, which has been so valuable obviously with all the AFC Championship games at Arrowhead.
Yeah, and Jacksonville's in a bad division. Like, they're in a much worse division than the Kansas City Chiefs. So that AFC tiebreaker could wind up being huge at the end of the season. But I just think the Chiefs, there is some desperation because you just always assume that Patrick Mahomes is going to make everything better and you don't have to worry about him. But I think we really underestimated the amount of growth that they need to see from these wide receivers to be successful this season. Now, Travis Kelce is going to make everything easier, assuming he is fully healthy and good to go this week. I'm really hoping he is, because he's found a lot of success against Jacksonville over the last couple of years when they've played. But when Travis Kelce isn't on the field, like we saw it in week one, Mahomes just doesn't really trust a lot of these guys right now. And like Marquez Valdez-Scantling is maybe his most trusted wide receiver. And we know exactly who MVS is. Like MVS is just a veteran wide receiver who can make some plays here and there, but generally is pretty inconsistent. Like he's not a guy that's going to all of a sudden have like a 1,300 yard season or something like that. Like he's a middling veteran wide receiver, and they need some of these young guys to hit. I'd like to see more Rashee Rice. I'd like to see more of Justin Ross. Sky Moore is really letting me down, and I don't know that I'm confident Kadarius Toney is like a full-time wide receiver, or if he's just kind of a gadget player for the Chiefs at this point. Like they have a lot of questions that they need to answer, and they need to see some development from this wide receiver room over the course of the season. That's the biggest thing that scares me, but I still think the Chiefs offensively match up pretty well with the Jaguars defensively.
I think that's well said. I also can't see Patrick Mahomes kind of letting them. I hate to be Pete, like Mr. Refuse to Lose, whatever, but like I do kind of see like a willing, like a dragging towards the goal line if it takes that. Let's pick it. I'm going to take the Chiefs to win and to cover. It kind of sounds like you're leaning in that direction as well.
I am. I'm going to take the Chiefs and the points. I think they can close this game out by at least like a touchdown.
Okay. Let's go to Buffalo, who is making their home debut this season. The Las Vegas Raiders, the only undefeated team in the building. This Sunday, the Bills are laying 8 points at home despite a really poor offensive showing on Monday night. I've said this several times throughout the week on different things I've done. I don't know if you know, Stephen, but Cowboys fans kind of hate Josh Allen, and has nothing to do with Josh. But it's just like the lack of heat that he catches relative to what Dak Prescott catches. Again, I think you kind of understand the point. And it did feel like this week the machine, the like national machine, kind of caught up a little bit. Like Josh Allen was kind of in the crosshairs this week. This does feel like a really big opportunity or big moment that it could be big if it went the wrong way for the Bills. If they fell to 0-2, if the offense was lackluster, I think it could become a really tense sort of situation for them, especially given all the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs stuff that we've seen over the course of the last months.
So right now, my preseason Bills prediction is looking really good through 1 week.
Hours.
Yes.
I've hated on them for months. So
also,
hours.
our 49ers prediction appears to have blown up in our face already. So we'll get to that later out of the show.
Right.
But so far, I think what we need to see from Josh Allen this season, and like I'm not arguing that he's not a special player. He is a special player who has had a lot of success over the last several years, and he's the reason that the Bills are an AFC contender every year. But you kind of need to see him take that next level, because he's always going to be aggressive. He's always going to turn the football over. But I just haven't seen growth from him. Like after a couple of years ago, we saw that huge step from him where he took that huge leap where, you know, all of his completion and accuracy, like all shot through the roof, and he went nuts. And it was like, okay, that's a legitimate superstar quarterback now. I think the last couple of seasons, you can make the case he's just kind of floundered in that same area. Like he hasn't really gone to another level. And they don't have a pass catcher outside of Stephon Diggs who can easily win matchups and who you can easily rely on to make plays. And we've talked about that a lot in the offseason. Like the Bills have not drafted particularly well. Like they hope that Dalton Kincaid, I guess, is their number 2 pass catcher. Like a rookie tight end, that's not the greatest situation to be in. And I am willing to chalk up week 1 to that Jets defense is really, really good. And
offense was down across the league as a whole too.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think the Jets defense and the Cowboys defense are the 2 best in football, in my personal opinion. And he struggled against them last season and looked really bad against them last season. So I'm willing to bet that that's just kind of what happened here. Like this Raiders defense is not that. So I'm taking Buffalo. It's a lot of points, but I think they are going to just dominate the Raiders despite the Raiders like reasonable performance in week 1. I think this is a big bounce back game for Buffalo, even though long term, I'm not really optimistic about them this season.
Did you see Dominic Foxworth's analogy that he had on Mina Kimes' podcast this week? It was really good about Josh Allen. Did you see it?
No.
He said that I'm kind of paraphrasing and manipulating it a little bit, but he said that Josh Allen is effectively Superman, which is awesome. And sometimes you have to like fly in and like fight the aliens and whatever, but sometimes like you got to help the old lady cross the street, or sometimes you have to get like the kitten out of the tree. And like Josh Allen can't do that without like causing casualties. You know what I'm saying? Like he just like sometimes, dude, you don't have to like. It's not even the turnovers, which were really bad and really poor on Monday night. It's like, dude, why are you like trying to hurdle people like at every moment? Like it's like the guy thinks he's in a movie. And you don't have to be like it's week one. Like even if you'd won that game, like you are the franchise. Like why are you putting yourself like at risk like this? But beyond just that, which is a big thing in and of itself, that was my biggest criticism of the Bills. I said that they were effectively the Cowboys of the AFC in terms of like what they needed to do over the offseason. And what did we see Dallas do? They didn't have enough explosive playmakers. They went and got Brandon Cooks. They drafted Deuce Vaughn. They've established a role for Cavante Turpin. Obviously, they also added Stephon Gilmore on the defensive side of things. You're right. Like that's also what I said. Like, okay, so Dalton Kincaid, like that's it. Like, oh, because he lines up in the slot, he's a receiver. Like, no, like you need like I have said this and I'm going to say it till I'm blue in the face. Nobody has gotten more out of a loss than Josh got from that divisional loss in Kansas City. And like everyone keeps thinking, oh, well, Gabe Davis had an amazing game that they lost. He is not a proper running mate for Stephon Diggs in the offense. We have more than enough evidence to know this. Like that I'm afraid that their offense has a really low ceiling. And we're going to see that over the course of the next few weeks. I'll take them to win, but I'm not laying the points. I'll take the Raiders to cover.
It is worth mentioning that Jacoby Myers, who had a great week
Right.
one, is doubtful for this game in concussion protocol. So the Raiders are already going to be shorthanded, and I think they're just the less talented team in general.
Yeah, I know we didn't really talk about them that much. They might be
I don't have much for Jimmy G.
Yeah,
The week one was fine.
they might be the least impressive team that won last week, but you know, whatever. I digress. Okay, so by the way, we will tweet out a graphic with all of our picks. Those are straight up picks, not our against the spread. Like I said, I'm taking the Raiders to cover, but the Bills to win. And if they don't win, it would truly be hilarious. But anyway, Stephen, the Seahawks are coming off of a loss that none of us expected and visiting Ford Field, which Dan Campbell said he expects to be louder than Arrowhead. I'm sure that did not upset Chiefs fans at all. The Lions are laying 5 points in their home opener and have, had 10 days to kind of come off of a win that impressed the world. I'm going to go ahead and I'm still not in, whatever, but I'm definitely a little bit out on Seattle. Like it does kind of feel like the clock hit midnight a little bit, or maybe it's like 11:57, and we're seeing the metamorphosis. Like the pumpkin is kind of returning here, which is a bummer because I really would have loved to have seen this offense wake up. But I'm going to back off until they prove a little bit more to me. I'm going to take the Lions and I'm going to lay the points.
I am also taking the Lions. And, in the preseason, when we're talking about the NFC team, Seattle was getting a lot of love, specifically because of their offense. And, if you had faith in Geno Smith keeping this thing going based off of what he did last season. But after their week one performance, their offensive line is falling apart. You can't really feel good about their offensive line right now in the protection because it wasn't particularly good in week one. And last season, their young offensive linemen, looked good early in the season, then kind of seemed to hit a wall, and it really kind of got worse as the season went on. And their defense just isn't particularly good. They just don't have a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. So I think this is an easy win for Detroit. And I know Detroit's offense underwhelmed a little bit in week one. I think they're going to put up points and easily win this football game because I just don't have faith in the Seahawks offensive line and the protection that they're going to be able to provide for Geno Smith right now. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, Dan Campbell has made some jokes this week, but Jahmyr Gibbs needs to get more touches. Jahmyr Gibbs looked like he was one of the most explosive playmakers on that Lions offense, and they only gave him a handful of touches against the Chiefs. This could be a big Jahmyr Gibbs blow up game, and Amon-Ra is good. And I just think that Detroit Lions pass rush is just going to be all over the Seahawks offensive line. I don't feel good about Seattle moving forward right now.
it would be such a bummer for the Seahawks to be 0-2 because I can't remember if you did, but I picked them to win the NFC West. Again, talk about like Niners, predictions just blowing up in my face. But just kind of sad, kind of just a huge bummer when it comes to the Seahawks. But good for the Lions. Anyway, the Los Angeles Chargers are coming off of a season opening loss as well. This is one of the 0-1 matchups, and they're visiting the Tennessee Titans, who lost the worst football game that anybody ever had to watch last week in New Orleans. I'm just going to say it, Steven, and get it out of the way. The Chargers are 3-point favorites. This is my lock of the week. I'm locking up the Chargers, if that isn't obvious. I just don't believe in the Titans offense at all. And I know that the Chargers lost last week. I think they're kind of frauds in a little bit, and I've been feeling this way for a while. That's why I'm part of the kingdom. But I certainly trust them to cut. This feels really fake to me. Like, they're only getting 3 points. Like, why should we believe that the Titans offense can at all go shot for shot with them? Like, this feels like free money.
Because the Titans do this every season, and there's no easy wins against Tennessee. Their defensive line is great. Like, Tennessee's defensive line is awesome, and they were fantastic in week 1, getting pressure. But I still think the Chargers win, and I'll take them with the points. But Austin Eckler is super questionable for this game. Joey Bosa is already banged up. Like, it's just rinse and repeat for the Chargers. Like, expectations through the roof in the offseason. Justin Herbert's going to be an MVP candidate, and they're finally going to get over the hump against the Chiefs. And then week 1, it's like, oh, you got absolutely torched by the Miami Dolphins and lost a 1-possession game, like typical Chargers. And I'm going to take them in this game because I agree with you that Tennessee offensively just doesn't have it. Like, there's just not enough talent on that side of the ball. But I still think it's going to be close, and I need to see the Chargers like actually prove it. Like, the whole Kellen Moore thing. Like, can we talk about that? Like, because I was expecting like even more out of this Chargers offense in week 1, and they just ran the ball a ton as opposed to airing it out with Justin Herbert.
So the Kellen Moore thing, I will tell you, there's not a Cowboys fan out there that's like, oh man, what a loser, he sucks, blah blah blah. But so Mike McCarthy had a comment in the offseason, I don't know if you remember, where he said that he's been where Kellen is at, like at his stage of his career, where you just want to light up the scoreboard. And McCarthy was like, I'm interested in other things. And everybody dragged McCarthy for that. Like, oh, what an imbecile. Like, this guy doesn't want to score 1 million points. Like, what a stupid mentality and stupid approach. But like, watching the way the Cowboys called their win against the Giants last week, like, it was kind of obvious that McCarthy was kind of more about like understanding the rhythm of the game and the pace of the game. And I think that was kind of on display with what the Chargers did last week. Like, it was just about like, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. And it's like, you have to play overall balanced team football. And that might be working against the Chargers. Like, that, it might lead to a lot of points, but if you play an offense that can score a lot as well, like, you have to have that balance. It sounds like lame football cliche, but he might just be like living at one end of the spectrum. And I don't think that you can sustain things that way.
Yeah, I agree. I still like the Chargers. They did nothing in week 1 to make me think that they're any different from the team that we saw last season, really.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. If they fall to 0-2, it'd be super interesting because they play the Vikings next week, and then it would be this matchup of like, okay, who's going to be the true fraud loser this season? But let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens, who will be in Cincinnati this week. The Bengals, coming off that really dreadful week 1 loss to the Browns, they're getting 3.5 points here against a Ravens team that, while Todd Monken's offense featured 3 wide receivers like for the first time ever in the Lamar Jackson era for a lot of the game, they still, I mean, it felt like pulling teeth. It felt like a dance where like they were stepping on each other's feet. Like, maybe some of that is just they need time to kind of develop and find their proper rhythm. But Baltimore seemed a little bit off. I have struggled with this game because I don't want to bet against Joe Burrow, but the Bengals looked so bad last week.
This is a really interesting game, and I mean, I think I'm going to take the Ravens and the points in this one just because of how bad Cincinnati looked last week. Like, Joe Burrow just did not look right, and it's pretty obvious that he's not 100% healthy right now. And that passing attack couldn't have been worse. I think Joe Burrow have like 82 passing yards in week 1. Like, T. Higgins had like 8 targets and 0 catches. Like, it was just really, really bad. But yeah, I agree with you on the Ravens. The Ravens kind of looked similar to the Chiefs in week 1, where new offensive coordinator running a new scheme. Lamar just isn't a running quarterback anymore, I guess.
Right.
He's more of a pocket passer now, and we'll see how that continues to develop. I think you got to find a way to marry the two and try to make it work. But there was some sloppy moments from the Ravens as they're trying to figure out this new offensive scheme and how to operate everything. And Zay Flowers looks great, but he's a rookie wide receiver who's going to be up and down here and there. But I think overall, I have a little bit more faith in the Ravens right now, just as a top to bottom team, than Cincinnati based off of that week 1 performance. Because if this is the Joe Burrow that we're going to get for a month, like Cincy may actually be in trouble, because I don't think they can overcome those things if Joe Burrow isn't out there playing like an elite quarterback.
I'm gonna take the Bengals. I agree with everything you've said, but like this is kind of my approach to a lot of things right now. Is I'm ready. I'm willing to be proven wrong. So I'm kind of willing to believe in the Bengals until they, we have like a larger sample size. Like in a lot of ways for a lot of teams and a lot of players, I'm willing to kind of throw week 1, out as this, it's week 1, whatever, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, like it's fair. Like I do think the way we talked about how like the national machine kind of woke up and went after Josh Allen this week. If the Bengals perform poorly and if they lose and if Joe Burrow has a poor outing, like he might be next. You know what I mean? Like because he's got the big contract, like he's an easy target. And the Bengals are never really the subject of discourse. Like, like they're generally only the subject of praise. I mean, and for obvious reasons because they've been so great recently. But this would be tough. And if they were to drop this game, they'd be 0-2, which they were last year, but they'd be 0-2 within the division. They'd obviously already be down to the Ravens and the Browns, who are probably their top 2 challengers because we were all wrong on the Steelers last week. So yeah, I feel like the Bengals kind of need it more. But the Ravens, to your point, like I don't want to say that they played with fire last week, but if Lamar had this moment last week where he's just running so carelessly with the ball, and like if those things happen against a better team than the Texans, they might have lost. So I'm very interested to see like who kind of proves themselves a little bit more in this game. I'm just willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the Bengals a little bit more. So whatever.
Yeah, I see it. It's just, man, they were so bad offensively in week 1. It was so bad. But they're a more talented team than what they showcased last week.
The Green Bay Packers are being given a 1.5 in Atlanta. I looked at this 5 times because I did not believe it to be real. Of the non-obvious things that happened in week 1, like my biggest kind of takeaway or impression was like, hey, I may have underestimated or overlooked the Green Bay Packers. I might be willing to believe in them as NFC North contenders once again. I don't know that I'm ready to like fully buy in on Jordan Love, but last week was really impressive. And I'm definitely, again, I don't know how I feel about the whole like return of the run game, blah, blah, but like the Packers run game looks great. Their defense looks impressive. I know it was the Bears, and so you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because they own them, but why are they 1.5-point underdogs against the Falcons, Stephen?
I don't really know. I guess it's because, Christian Watson's questionable. Aaron Jones is questionable. He's also banged up this week. Romeo Doubs wound up playing last week, but he was super questionable going into the game. And they're just a young team that I think everybody is still kind of trying to figure out. And it was an impressive performance in week 1, but like, I think what I took away from week 1 is that Matt LaFleur is a good coach and he's getting a lot out of his young players and trying to put them in a situation to succeed. I'm not optimistic about the Falcons and what they showcased in week 1. So I mean, I'll take the Packers here and the points because I think the Packers are better coached, and despite the fact that they're a really young team with a lot of young and experienced players, I just think that their coaching staff is putting them in positions to win right now, and they looked really good last week doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit jaded on the Packers coaching staff because it feels like they've been given credit. It's been like, well, you can't just say everything that happened was Aaron Rodgers, and that benefit wasn't applied to Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not here to dump on Aaron Rodgers this week, but it I think is becoming more apparent than ever that Aaron has had really great coaching in his time in Green Bay between both Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur. Like I didn't really buy into Matt LaFleur, but and again, it's 1 week, but like it was impressive. And while the Falcons look nice and Bijan had the awesome touchdown, like if you can't involve Kyle Pitts and Drake London on a consistent basis, like I'm I'm sorry. Like, I can't take you seriously. I don't know what I think their ceiling is or their future is. Like, I don't know if I think Arthur Smith is in trouble. I used to
He
find
should
this out,
be. He
but
should be.
I don't know. Like, we're, like, maybe you agree. Like, the Falcons were always kind of like an interesting team. Like, they were never like a center stage Tiffany brand team, but they were always interesting. Like, the Falcons have really regressed to a state of boredom that I think is new for that franchise.
Well, and it makes sense that Arthur Smith is like this because he comes over from Tennessee, and it's kind of the same philosophy. Like, we're just gonna run the football, and we're gonna play these tough, gritty, hard to
Right.
watch football games and try to win that way. But like, if I'm the Atlanta Falcons organization, I'm looking at what Arthur Smith is doing, and I'm looking at what other championship caliber teams are doing. I'm like, yeah, Tennessee hasn't won anything. Like, obviously, we're not going to win anything. How many offensive picks do we have to put on this offense for you to just ignore? Like, because that is absolutely insane. Like, the amount of draft capital that they put into Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan, and I know Tyler Algier is a good player, a fifth round running back, but like, these are all top 10 picks. like what are we doing here? Like, those are the guys you have to get involved. And Arthur Smith thinks it's all cute and like coy to be like, no, that's just, they'll get their opportunities when they get their opportunities. Like, no, if I'm the Falcons front office, I'm like, what's the point? What's the point if you're just going to ignore them and not even try to get them involved in the offense? Like, Drake London seems like a talented player. I don't know if Drake London's a superstar or anything. I think Kyle Pitts has shown enough to be like, well, if Kyle Pitts was getting a Travis Kelce workload, he could be a superstar, but they don't even care to get him the ball. It's infuriating to watch.
I didn't realize that this was going to trigger you so
It's
badly.
also, it's fantasy. Like, I've got Atlanta Falcons all over the place.
I won't touch
So
them for this reason. Like, I mean, I'm hopeful for you, but like, I won't touch them on principle. We should mention this is BLG's lock of the week. He's taking the Packers. Both you and he hit last week. We talked about you hit on the Jaguars. He locked up the Cowboys. That was easy. I missed because I took the Vikings and foolishly believed. So I'm the only one who doesn't have a dub there this season. Speaking of things I believed in, Steven, the Chicago Bears are 2.5-point dogs against the Buccaneers. Like I sort of abandoned ship with the Vikings. This is such a bummer, dude. And you believe in Justin Fields along with me, maybe not to the same degree. I believe in Justin Fields. I really love Matt Eberflus. My dog is named Bear. Like, I want this to work so badly. But you mentioned this when talking about the Chargers. If any team looked the exact same way they looked at the end of last season in week 1, it was the Bears. I can't. But that being said, I'm going to pick them because it just has to work. Like, it can't. Like, how can you trade for DJ Moore and all this stuff and like it not work? It has to. And I don't buy into the Buccaneers that much. I think the Bucs are kind of feeling themselves after that week 1 win. So I think they're kind of ripe for a big time loss. But I will say this is the pick that I'm the least confident in this week.
I'm zapping myself on this game. I am picking the Bucs because I think their defense was impressive in week 1, and that's how disappointing the Bears were.
Wow. I'm glad we can self-zap. Let's move on. The Indianapolis Colts, kind of in a perplexing way as well, are 1.5-point dogs on the road against the Texans. I have recognized that so I'm a Houston Astros fan, so I have this like soft spot for the Texans. You know what I mean? Like, it would be cool if they were good. I've recognized that I've allowed that to cloud my judgment too much. And so why are the Texans 1.5-point favorites against the Colts? I know the Colts kind of got in their own way last week a little bit, but they kind of hung with the Jaguars, and you can make an argument that they should have won that game. Anthony Richardson looks really good. I mean, Michael Pittman looked fine. I don't know about Deion Jackson. This looks like a team that if Jonathan Taylor comes back and doesn't hate them, like, could be kind of, in the mix and fun and spunky. So that's what I'm saying. Like, why are the Texans favored?
This is actually my lock of the week, and I am taking the Colts to beat the Texans. I guess it's just a home field thing with two young teams and not really knowing what to expect after week 1 from both of these squads. And CJ Stroud had some nice moments in week 1 too. I think that when you look at what the Colts did and what the Texans did, like, the Texans obviously have one of the youngest rosters in the NFL, and just talent wise, I just think they're farther away from being competitive than the Colts are. And I think the Colts are still a long way from being super competitive. But Anthony Richardson looked really, really promising in week 1. Like, obviously, we knew he was going to be able to run. We know he's physically just an insane athlete. But what was impressive was how much they were actually letting him throw the ball and trusting him to do that and work within the offense in week 1. And I just think right now, like, the Colts just look like they're probably the better football team, and the Texans are going to go through a lot of growing pains with CJ Stroud this year and D'Amico Ryans as they kind of figure out who they are with all of these young players. I have more faith in the Colts than that game line suggests.
I agree with you. It's a good lock. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. That's really all I kind of have to offer. I'm not backing on the Colts, but I'm at least at the point with them where I'm willing to recognize that they're an NFL franchise. So that's a bit of a promotion for me. Let's move on. The San Francisco 49ers are visiting the LA Rams this week, Stephen. We talked about it, so no self-zap here. The Niners are 7.5-point favorites. We were wrong. All right. Clean sweep across the board last week. We all took the Steelers. It was really embarrassing. The scariest part to me about the Niners and the way they played in week one was it wasn't just the defense was dominant. It was that the offense didn't skip a beat. The Christian McCaffrey looked great. The Brock Purdy phenomenon kept on going. Like they really are inevitable. If anyone is Thanos, it is them.
Yeah, and I think part of my thoughts on them going into week one was kind of like, I think I was underestimating Brock Purdy a little bit. And, like what he did last season was amazing. But I was like, coming off the injury, like, is he really going to be that guy again and be able to just move this offense? And at the end of the day, they just have so much talent everywhere. Like, I totally agree with you. They're inevitable. If it's not Christian McCaffrey or Brandon Ayuk or George Kittle, then it's Deebo Samuel, and it's just unstoppable. And their offensive line's great. The defense looked absolutely dominant. And yeah, the Rams were a fun story in week one. They looked great, had a big blowout win over Seattle, but I am taking San Francisco. I'm taking the points in this game. I think the 49ers, after that week one performance, are just going to absolutely demolish the Rams.
I'm with you. I'm taking the Niners. I'm laying the points. You've talked about fantasy a lot. Week one on the waiver wire can like win or lose a season for somebody, right? Like, because that's your chance to kind of grab the last potential superstar of the year. Like, I remember in 2011, a guy in my league grabbed Cam Newton because it was like impressive after week one, and that was just like it was over after that. I think there might be some Puka Nacua regret. You know what I mean? Like as the season rolls along, like all the people who spent like big parts of their budget or whatever.
Yeah.
Again, like might work out for a little bit, but like that just doesn't seem like something that's going to be stable all season long.
Oh, he also missed Thursday's practice with a weak injury, so that's not great. You could have done what I did, and in my dynasty leagues, I've got Puka Nacua on every single one of my dynasty rosters because I think long term, he really does have some upside, and he is a really talented player like we saw in week one. But yeah, that's gonna diminish when Cooper Kupp comes back because Cooper Kupp is this offense. But Cooper Kupp plays so much from the slot, and Puka's more of an outside guy. Like to see him dominate the target totals when they have veterans like Van Jefferson, like it says a lot about what they think about Puka. So I think he still has value even when Cooper Kupp comes back. But if he doesn't play this week, there's going to be some regret. I also don't think you should start him this week because the 49ers are that good. And so if he does play and has 2 catches for 17 yards, like I told you, like just don't play him against the 49ers.
The New York Giants were the only team to not score a point in week one, Stephen. They will look to fix that on the road this week against the Arizona Cardinals. This is dangerous territory for the Giants. They are 4-point favorites, by the way, against a Cardinals team that kept it close against the Commanders because we just sat here and, atoned like Cersei for our lack of belief in the Niners. Well, the Giants have a very quick turnaround on the West Coast. They will visit San Francisco on Thursday Night Football next week. So this is kind of, I wouldn't say a trap game, but like it's kind of easy to overlook, to be worried about the Niners, whatever. And the Giants look so bad. I'm going to take the Giants, but I really don't feel confident about it. Although I feel less confident in the Bears, like I said. But yeah, like I'll take them and lay the points. But man, it's a really scary sort of feeling, I think, if you're a Giants fan right now.
So I haven't seen an update on Darren Waller's status for this game, but it's not great when he says, yeah, it's the same hamstring that put me on IR last season. And it's not really more of a muscle thing. It's a nerve thing. Can't imagine that that's easy to fix in the middle of an NFL season. So I am super questionable about him, but I'm going to take the Giants confidently in this game because I think the Cardinals are that bad. And I know they hung with the Commanders last week, But to me, that just says that was a game between two bad football teams who are more evenly matched with the lack of talent that they have overall. I just have faith in Brian Dable, and Daniel Jones is going to be boomer bust like this. Like, this is who he's been his entire career. He's not an elite quarterback, but in the right situations with the right play caller, he can have some big weeks. And I think this is going to be a big week for him in that offense. That they're going to bounce back. They're not going to go scoreless 2 weeks in a row. I'm pretty confidently taking the Giants, even if Darren Waller's not in this game.
I don't think it's inconceivable to pick them to win, but to be confident and to say that the offense is going to bounce back, that's, it's a bold. You're a little.
Saquon's going to have a nice day.
Okay, Steven. Let's go to those Cowboys, the New York Jets visiting them. This line opened at Dallas being favored by 3.5, depending where you look. Then it grew to 7.5. Obviously, after the Aaron Rodgers injury, that grew a little bit more. It's now a 9.5. The Cowboys have not started off 2-0, Steven, since 2019. They actually started off 3-0 before losing 3 in a row. That third one was against the returning from mono, Sam Darnold, New York Jets. So Cowboys haven't beaten the Jets in a while, actually. And the aforementioned Ryan Fitzpatrick was actually the quarterback of the Jets last time they visited Dallas, and the Jets won that game. But it's hard to imagine, I think, the Cowboys losing this game. It's been a week for the Jets. I don't know how they can kind of make it through this, but I mean, crazy things obviously happen in the NFL.
I think the Cowboys could get another shutout in this game. I know they're really hard to come by in the NFL. But the most devastating thing about the Aaron Rodgers injury for the Jets is, like, we didn't even get a glimpse of what it was going to look like.
Right.
Like, you can't ever plan for that kind of stuff. And it sucks because I think I mentioned it earlier in the show. Like, I think these are the two best defenses in the NFL. And with Aaron Rodgers, I would have to believe that this would have been a huge matchup. And this would have been like, two highly competitive teams that are contenders. And I just think after the Cowboys week 1 performance, and this was part of why I was down on the 49ers just in the NFC in general, like, I thought the Eagles and the Cowboys were the two most talented teams in football coming into this season, specifically because of that Cowboys defense. And they lived up to it in every way in week 1. Like, they could not have had a better performance against the Giants in week 1. So I'm going to take the Cowboys. It's a lot of points, but I'm easily taking the points because I just think they're going to absolutely demolish Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to lay the points. We talked about, I can't remember. I think I took the Texans to cover last week because Baltimore was favored by 10. We're like, that's a lot of points in the NFL. Actually, I think I took Ravens. I don't think, whatever. I would not be stunned if the Jets salvage this season a little bit, right? If it's kind of similar to last year, but it's just it's a hard week, right? Like, we've seen that, in different ways in the NFL. It's a short week coming off of Monday Night Football. They have to travel. And it's like, what makes the situation really unique is, like, it's not just like, oh, the franchise quarterback got hurt. It's like, oh, the dude that has to replace him is literally the dude that, like, we all acknowledge sucked and was so bad that we had to replace. So it's a tough situation. I'm with you. All day Monday before the game on Monday night, Cowboys fans were like, okay, Sunday was great, but let's do it against Aaron Rodgers. Like, there was this high level of hype going into it, especially because he's never lost in that building. And so, yeah, some of the steam was let out. This is CBS's #1 game this week. But yeah, I'll take Dallas. I'll lay the points. And then the Cowboys visit the Cardinals next week. I mean, it's a strong potential start to the season for the Cowboys.
I know the Cowboys offensive line is really banged up right now, and that could be a big problem in this game because that Jets pass rush is so good. So that's something to monitor, but I still think it's an easy Cowboys win.
Last one before we kind of get set to tie a bow on this. The Commanders are visiting the Broncos. Denver, despite losing last week and looking like the same boring, lethargic offense, the Broncos are 3.5-point favorites at home. I know it's not called Mile High. What's it called? It has a stupid name. What is it? Do you know?
I don't remember what it's
I think
called.
it's like Bank of America or something, whatever. But I'll go first. Look, I don't buy into the Broncos. I'm sorry. I'm really not the same way that Cowboys fans hate Josh Allen. They kind of hate Sean Payton because he's basically Mike McCarthy without the recent success. But he gets treated like he's this, like, dude who walks on water. I mean, what was there to believe in with the Broncos last week? The onside kick, which was super cool, was this like really desperate attempt to like remind people how amazing Sean Payton is and how amazing it was that he did it in the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna take the Commanders, especially if I'm getting points. I mean, I'm doing it. I'm gonna take the Commanders to get to 2-0.
I like the pick because I'm rooting for Eric Bieniemy to have success in Washington this season.
Right?
And I agree with you. Like Sean Payton is, I think, one of the most overrated coaches in the
Drag
league.
him.
And Denver did not look good in week one. Russell Wilson just looks like this is kind of the tail end of his career. And like he's just going to hang around the NFL for a couple more years because he's on a big contract. And he's just going to be a totally middling, like average to below average quarterback right
He's
now.
Matt Ryan in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it just doesn't look good. And, bringing in Sean Payton was supposed to like improve everything. And it really didn't inspire you in any way in week one. But it's at Denver. Like, I still think their defense is talented and they were having issues generating pressure a little bit last week, but their secondary is still really good. And the Commanders, they won against the Cardinals. But like I just said, like, that game, it didn't inspire me in any way for Washington. It just looked like two bad football teams playing a tight game like we see all the time in the NFL. So I need to see something more from Sam Howell and that Washington offense before I'm buying into anything that they're doing. So I'm going to take the Broncos in this one.
Who's the better quarterback in this game? Like that's a somewhat fair question.
I mean, like, think it's Russell Wilson.
It's but the fact that it's not a completely absurd question is like insane. You know what I mean? Like that really is wild. Look, it would be super interesting if the Broncos like showed up and like dropped like 50 points or something, even like 30 points. But like it's just like, man, like I actually have come to like resent the Broncos in this era because they're so boring. You know, like I just like it annoys me how boring they are. So I would love to see that change. But okay, so we differ there. We did our same game parlay, the Miami Dolphins visiting the New England Patriots. We obviously kind of touched on it, but the Dolphins getting 3 points. Where are you going here, Steven?
I'm going to take the Dolphins. I just think they're the more talented team, but I do think this is going to be a close one. Like, I don't think Tua's throwing for 460 yards, and I don't think Tyreek Hill is going for 200 plus receiving yards again. I just think at the end of the day, Mike McDaniel's offense is great, and it's fun to see. And I know Raheem Mostert is a little bit banged up, but I think he's just kind of getting some veteran rest. Like, you'd like to see them be able to run the football a little bit more effectively. Devon Achane, their rookie, might be available this week. He could be somebody to keep an eye on. But at the end of the day, the Patriots offense just isn't inspiring. And it looked better in week one compared to last season when they had no offensive coordinator and were just trying to figure it out as they went through the season. Now they've got Bill O'Brien. They've got a real offensive coordinator who could actually like dial some things up. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a close football game because I think the Patriots will always play this close in the division. But Miami's just a much more talented team. So I'll take them and the points.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I mean I agree with everything you said. I would sort of enjoy if the Patriots won this game. It'd be nice.
That would be fun too.
It would be interesting. I mean, I hope it's at least an entertaining game. I'll say this. You know what this is like. Like the Chiefs play at noon this week, right? But so like the Cowboys play at 3:00. So you know what it's like when you work the 3:00 game and then you got to do all this stuff after. Like you miss like the first half of Sunday Night Football. I'm kind of happy this is the game I'm going to miss the first half of. You know what I mean? Like it's I would be really bummed if like this was like I don't know. Even like the Monday night game, like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, like this is a game that you're fine missing the first half of. Is kind of my point, but I'll take the Dolphins. I'll lay the points.
I guarantee this will be a better football game than last week's Sunday night.
Not for me. Okay. There are 2 Monday Night Football games, and this is also the case next week, Steven. So I would be fine with this if they were on at separate times. I don't like that they're happening in parallel. That makes it really difficult on us as football fans, but whatever. One sentence each. First up, the New Orleans Saints getting 3 points, or giving 3 points, excuse me, in Carolina against the Panthers.
I like the Saints' explosive passing attack, and the Panthers did nothing to inspire me with Bryce Young last week. They don't have pass catchers, so I'll take the Saints.
The Saints, you need to tidy up these one sentences. Let's just the Saints have such an easy schedule this season. Give me New Orleans. Okay. Now Cleveland at Pittsburgh. We talked about this. The Browns giving 2.5 points. Pittsburgh on the verge of falling to 0-2, which would be pretty disappointing. One sentence.
The Browns defensive line is legit. I will take them against the Steelers.
The Steelers might not make it to above 500 this year. Wow. There it is. A full week 2 preview discussion. Shout out to Ryan Fitzpatrick for joining us. Stephen, as we leave, before we started here, I told you I watched Pulp Fiction for the first time in my life last week. I would like you to give us a classic, like something you regard. You're a movie buff, you're a cinephile, something that is in that pantheon that you recommend people to watch if they haven't seen before, or maybe to rewatch this weekend if they have seen it before, because it's that good. So what is that movie? What is your selection and why?
I will go with Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. I think it is one of the most important science fiction movies ever made, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Good pick. Never seen it.